The subconscious is an area of research that has always interested scientists, but has been growing in popularity more recently due to increased capacities of new technology. Timothy D. Wilson, professor of psychology at the University of Virginia and author of Strangers to Ourselves, states that the mind operates most efficiently by relegating a good deal of high-level, sophisticated thinking to the unconscious, just as a modern jetliner is able to fly on automatic pilot with little or no input from the human conscious pilot. The adaptive unconscious does an excellent job of sizing up the world, warning people of danger, setting goals, and initiating action in a sophisticated and efficient manner.
So if this is true, why don't we as humans always listen to our subconscious, our intuition? Malcolm Gladwell, author of Blink, argues that our intuition is fallible. Our instinctive reactions have to compete with other interests, emotions, and sentiments, and oftentimes we choose logical reasoning over intuition. Society tells us to be reasonable and value logic over nearly all else in debating and decision-making, but perhaps this method of thought is not truly the best or the most successful. Should we be choosing our reasoning over our intuition, or our intuition over our reasoning?
Before we dive further into this knowledge issue in class and explore different areas of knowledge, it is first necessary to share our definition of intuition. We will also look at multiple studies to gain a greater understanding. Gerhard Gigerenzer, a German psychologist who has studied heuristics in decision-making, argues that intuition involves the evolved capacities of the brain. He states that our subconscious makes the decision before we consciously do, and we thus try to catch up by reasoning out our decision.
Even so, our decisions through reasoning do not always match up to our subconscious decisions. Think about a time when you had to make a difficult decision, so you made a list of pros and cons of each option. In the end, your reasoning may have told you that one option was better, but you felt that the decision was wrong, that you should go with the other option. This is a sign that your subconscious, your intuition, has really made a decision long ago, and you tried to catch up through reasoning, yet your reasoning did not reach the same conclusion. Which answer is wrong? This video will discuss the subconscious part of the brain that made the decision quickly, and whether or not you should trust it.
Let's look at an example of intuition at work. Nalini Ambati, a social psychologist and professor at Stanford University in the Department of Psychology, conducted a study with college students. She showed each student a 10-second clip of a professor teaching in the classroom, and they were asked to judge how effective the teacher was. They rated different aspects of their teaching styles, and then the students who had been in the class with the professor for the entire semester rating their teaching styles as well. It was found that the ratings of the students who saw the professor for only 10 seconds closely matched those of the students who had been in the class for the whole semester.
Nalini Ambati then reduced the clip gradually until she was only showing students a 2-second clip of the teacher with the sound off. The ratings of the students watching the video still matched the ratings of the students who had been with the professor for the entire semester. Perhaps it did not even take the full 2 seconds for the subconscious to make a decision about the professor.
And this powerful rocket is enough to reach the escape velocity of 26,100.
Another study was conducted at the University of Iowa by Antonio Damasio, a Portuguese-American neuroscientist and neurobiologist, and involved a gambling game. Participants had an option of 4 decks, 2 red decks and 2 blue decks. The cards from the red decks were extremely risky, yet occasionally offered high rewards. The cards from the blue decks were safer, and were actually the only way that you could win the game.
By the time the participants chose the 80th card, they could use their reasoning to decode the game and figure out what was going on. They then started to only choose cards from the blue decks, the safer options. The most interesting result of the study, however, is that by the 10th card, it was recorded that people's palms had started to sweat whenever they reached for the red decks. This nervous energy indicates that their subconscious had already figured out the trick. The participants ignored their intuition for the first part of the game and suffered as a result.
A study conducted by Timothy D. Wilson, titled Introspecting About Reasons Can Reduce Post-Choice Satisfaction, researched the benefits of following intuition versus those of following reasoning. Timothy Wilson divided people into 2 groups, and each group was presented with 2 arbitrary posters. They were told to choose the one that they liked more and take it home. One group was told to give reasons for their choice, and the other one was instructed to choose the one they felt they liked best with no mandatory explanations. 4 weeks later, Timothy Wilson checked in on the participants to see how satisfied they were with their choices. He found that the people who selected the poster based off of intuition, those who did not have to go through the process of reasoning, were much happier with their choices than the second group was with theirs.
At this point, it is beneficial to define the difference between reasons and reasoning. It is important to understand that intuition and reason are not at odds, but intuition and reasoning most certainly are. Reasoning and intuition can be thought of as two different paths to take to a decision. You cannot be on two different paths at the same time. Intuition involves reasons, yet these reasons are made subconsciously and are too complex for our conscious brain to follow. Our conscious brain tries to make decisions through reasons as well, but cannot examine the problem as thoroughly as our subconscious, and thus our reasoning may be lacking certain reasons.
How does someone develop his or her intuition? David Brooks, author of The Social Animal, wrote about some examples of intuition at work. He discussed the experiences of U.S. soldiers who had been to Iraq and Afghanistan on multiple deployments. He wrote about how these soldiers could look down a street and immediately be able to predict if there was an IED, or improvised explosive device. When these soldiers were asked how they predicted the location of these bombs, they could not answer the question. They said things such as, "It felt cold," or "It felt wrong."
In his book Blank, Malcolm Gladwell discusses Vic Braden, a well-known tennis player who has been playing and coaching for around 40 years. Vic Braden could watch a match on television and be able to predict if someone was about to double fault before the player even touched the ball. Like the soldiers, Vic Braden went through the video footage afterwards to try and determine why he made these predictions, but he found that he could not provide any concrete reason.
A more everyday example of intuition would be an experienced driver's ability to tell when a car is about to switch lanes, before its blinker even goes on. There is no concrete reason why we can do this, but people who have driven a lot have developed the sense of intuition. These examples suggest that intuition is linked to experience and areas of expertise.
The subconscious mind can make roughly 10 million observations in any given setting, yet the conscious mind can make only around 100 to 150 observations, according to a study conducted at the University of Pennsylvania. Through experience, the subconscious can recognize many patterns that the conscious mind cannot, leaving us with this sense of intuition.
We can now evaluate this concept of intuition in various TOK areas of knowledge. Intuition in art is most commonly on the side of judgment. In judging a particular work of art, a viewer can intuitively tell if he or she likes it, if it is appealing, or whether what the artist did works. An artist can look back on his own art and analyze a particular move or action to determine if it was the correct one. He may feel that perhaps he should have used a different color, focal point, line position, or lighting. The artist can tell if something works or if something is somewhat off, and knows all of this without any reason or explanation why. This is intuition in art, and it cannot be taught or reasoned out.
This brings art back to intuition once again, albeit a learned intuition. Therefore, perhaps when artists are asked why they placed an object in a specific location and they cannot respond, it is because they have so much experience in the field that their subconscious has taken over. This refers back to the explanation of how intuition and reason are not at odds, but rather they are actually frequently used in tangent with each other. On the other hand, many people may argue that art can be taught through reason, which is exactly what art lessons are for. People can learn how to paint and how to draw. Through experience, they can become better and better in this area, until they become experts in their field. When this happens, the artists no longer have to think about the choices that they make, because it happens naturally without thinking, arguably a subconscious decision. A contrasting view argues that the most successful people often mix intuition and reasoning. For these people, intuition functions as part of the reasoning process. Perhaps some of our most successful ideas are often thrown away simply because society teaches us to value logic over everything else. In order to combat this, one must use both intuition and logical reasoning. For most of us, we need to have a consensus of what we as a society agree on, and that's logic. But you cannot let logic get in the way of intuition. In our presentation, we will be further exploring intuition and reasoning in various areas of knowledge, similar to what we have already done in looking at the arts. Based on each specific area of knowledge, we will be continuing to explore whether following intuition or reasoning would yield the most successful result, or if intuition and reasoning are not so much opposed to each other as we are led to believe. We will also look at changes in intuition as one grows older, and if intuition evolves and develops with age.